We begin the day with a U.S. president considering his next move. As the hours pass, Donald Trump appears to be warming to the idea of hitting Iranian nuclear facilities. He told reporters in Washington that his patience with the Iranian regime had run out. He called their leaders bullies, and he said it was very late to be talking. Now, an American intervention in Iran would be a monumental moment in the second presidency of Donald Trump. It could embroil the U.S. in the kind of war Trump promised he would never risk in the Middle East. So is it all just bluster to force Iran's hand at the negotiating table? The president didn't get drawn in when asked whether he was weighing up a strike.
You don't seriously think I'm going to answer that question? Will you strike the Iranian nuclear component? And what time exactly, sir? Sir, would you strike it? Would you please inform us so we can be there and watch? I mean, you don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble, and they want to negotiate. And I said, why didn't you negotiate with me before? All this death and destruction. I don't know how much longer it's going to go on. I mean, they're totally defenseless. They have no air defense whatsoever. We've totally captured, we've totally captured the air. Nothing's finished until it's finished. War is very complex. A lot of bad things can happen. A lot of turns are made. So I don't know. I wouldn't say that we won anything yet. I would say that we sure as hell made a lot of progress. And we'll see. The next week is going to be very big, maybe less than a week.
Well, Trump says he wants Iran to surrender unconditionally and give up its uranium enrichment program. Earlier, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei rejected that demand and warned the U.S. against military intervention.
America getting involved in this would be 100% to its detriment. The damage it would suffer would be much greater than what Iran may suffer. The damage to America, if it gets involved militarily, would undoubtedly be irreparable damage.
Rosemary Kelanic is the director of the Middle East program at Defense Priorities. That's an American think tank that advocates for more restrained foreign policy. Rosemary, welcome to DW. What do you make of Trump's rhetoric on Iran? Does he have a strategy?
Well, it's never totally clear with Trump what his strategy is, or if he has one, or if his strategy is just sort of flying by the seat of his pants. And I think that there is a certain amount of improvisation occurring here. But I do think that Trump is interested in still making a deal with Iran. I think it's one reason that the United States has not struck Iran yet, which I think would be a terrible mistake for the United States to do. I think that Trump thinks he can still bring Iran back to the negotiating table and maybe get better terms than we otherwise would have been able to do before these strikes occurred.
Yeah, the U.S. was actually in the middle of talks with Iran over its nuclear program when Israel launched its attacks last week. Now Donald Trump says Iran was not negotiating. What do you make of that?
The president engages in a lot of bluster, and I think he does it to try to make his threats more credible. Iran was negotiating. We know that they were negotiating with us. We had a date with them for last Sunday to have negotiations, and events sort of overcame that. But I don't think that Trump is set on what he's going to do yet. I think he's still considering his options. And he is a sort of deal maker par excellence. So I'm hopeful that diplomacy can still work and war can be avoided, at least war between the United States and Iran.
Trump says he set Iran a 60-day ultimatum to reach a deal. Let's take a listen to what U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had to say about that today.
We know right now that Iran understands exactly what the president is saying. He said 60 days. The world can believe it, and the world cannot believe it. He said 60 days. They had an opportunity to make a deal. They should have made a deal. President Trump's word means something.
You have argued in favor of diplomacy. Do you think Trump was ever really interested in a diplomatic solution or just in trying to force Iran to reach a deal purely on his terms?
Oh, I think he's 100% interested in a diplomatic solution, 100%. I think that, it's unfortunate that it hasn't turned out that way. And I'm not sure that it was Trump's plan for things to unfold in this manner. In fact, I think Trump was, based on the coverage I've seen, I don't think that Trump wanted Israel to strike. I think that Trump urged them not to. And ultimately, he's trying to save face here by claiming that this was the plan all along when it wasn't.
But then we're seeing something striking. He uses we a lot. He says, we now control the skies over Iran. We made a lot of progress. What do you think that signals? Really, what I'm hearing you imply is that he wants to put some distance between what's happening in the Middle East and the decisions he is taking in the White House.
Well, I'm not sure that he wants to put distance. I think he should try to put distance. But I think that Trump, he has a certain level of ego. And when he sees something that looks like it's going well, at least in the short term from the Israeli perspective, I think he's wanting to jump on the bandwagon and claim success and claim some ownership over that, even though, he's, as far as we know anyhow, the United States is not involved in offensively attacking Iran. We know the United States is involved in defending Israel from Iranian missiles. So he could be referring to that in part.
Talking about ownership, how much of what we're seeing today has to do with Trump pulling the U.S. out of its nuclear deal with Iran in his first term?
It all comes from that decision, frankly. I think that pulling out of the JCPOA was a terrible mistake by Trump in his first term. As far as we know, Iran was complying with the deal under the JCPOA early in Trump's term. His own administration agreed with that. They certified the deal a couple of times. The deal had strong safeguards for inspections. It would have pushed Iran, their ability to enrich at higher levels out by 10 or 15 years. It was certainly better than what we have now. And it was better than what we had shortly after Trump pulled us out of the deal. So, yes, 100%. This crisis, I think, was caused by the president and by his decision making in his first term and his decision making now in trying to, make this an issue and imposing a 60-day deadline when that wasn't necessary. Right. I mean, Iran had been enriching uranium peacefully for years and could have been pursuing a bomb. Like, they weren't pursuing a bomb. This is what U.S. intelligence says. U.S. intelligence says, we don't believe that they were pursuing nuclear weapons. They had a centrifuge enrichment program, but they didn't enrich beyond 60%, and you have to enrich to 90% to build a bomb. So, we had several years where the Iranians would have been capable of enriching to 90% and did not do so, I think because they wanted to make a deal. This was their negotiating card. Hey, we can enrich up to 60%, so make a deal with us to prevent us from going all the way. I don't think they ever intended to go all the way. I do think airstrikes makes that more likely now, but if the United States can exercise restraint and stay out of the war, I do think there's still hope that we can have a diplomatic solution and that Iran will not proliferate.
They did proliferate beyond what would have been needed for civilian use, though, just to make that clear to our viewers. Now, that other scenario that I know you would not like to see, but if the U.S. really decided to get involved directly, what would be the military options on the table?
Well, one reason it's, I think, a terrible idea is that the military options are not good. I don't think there's been enough discussion, realistic discussion in the press in the United States on what the military options are. I think there's a lot of bravado coming from the Trump administration suggesting that all we have to do is airstrikes and we'll put our buster bunkers in there and we'll blow up Fordo and that will sort of be it. But I think it's very unlikely that we would be able to destroy an entire nuclear program that's spread across many sites that are built under mountains, half a mile under mountains in some cases, right? Just from the air. How do you know for sure you've destroyed all the centrifuges? How do you know for sure you've destroyed all the uranium stockpiles? The only way to know that for sure is by putting boots on the ground. Now, I don't think that's what the people who are in favor of war are telling him. I think they're telling him, hey, this is just airstrikes, quick and simple, overwhelming victory. I think that's very unlikely to happen. I think if we get involved a little bit, we're going to get involved a lot. and we're going to end up putting U.S. troops on the ground. And I think that would be a terrible mistake, one that the U.S. public is solidly against. There's no public support for boots on the ground in Iran, and there's no public support, as far as I can tell, for airstrikes against Iran.
That sounds like a worst-case scenario you're painting there. What would be the best-case scenario of a U.S. involvement?
The best-case scenario, and let me be clear, this is not what I think is. I think diplomacy is a better-case scenario, but the best-case scenario would be that the United States joins the strikes and still is able to bring Iran to the negotiating table. I just don't see how we can join the strikes and not have cooperation from Iran, where somebody has to go in and make sure that all those sites are actually destroyed, right? That somebody, right, either has to be international inspectors through a new nuclear deal, or it has to be boots on the ground, right?
Many people that Donald Trump has been relying on to spread his message for years now are firmly opposed to getting more actively involved in Iran. You know, you have Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon. They firmly oppose any U.S. intervention in Iran, in the Middle East, in any other country than the U.S., basically. Do you think their voices will end up winning out? Is he listening to them?
I don't know. I think it could go either way at this point, to be honest with you. You know, Trump has been a political Houdini for years now, right? He gets into these situations. He's an escape artist, right? He gets into these situations and he's able to get out of them, and he finesses the landing somehow. I don't really quite know how he does it, but I do think that this is a core element of the MAGA movement: is no foreign wars, no wars in the Middle East. And I think this might be the one thing that actually really does undermine Trump's support domestically among his base if Trump goes through with this war. Now, whether the MAGA base will win the policy or the more hawkish elements of the Republican Party will win, I don't know. But I would also point out that it's not legal in the United States for the president to launch a war against a country that hasn't attacked us without congressional authorization. So I expect there's going to be some kind of showdown over that as well. In fact, it's already starting.
Yeah, there is a bipartisan initiative starting right now in Congress. That was Rosemary Kelanic, director of the Middle East program at Defense Priorities. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's bring in Bente Scheller. She's the head of the Middle East and North Africa division at the Heinrich Böll Foundation, which is affiliated to Germany's Green Party. Bente, good to see you again. Now, our previous guest there, you might have heard her, said this conflict between Israel and Iran could become a world war, forcing regional partners as well as allies to take sides. What's your take here?
Well, I really, really hope that we are really far away from that. But what I really see is a dangerous escalation, one that has seen rhetoric that is mutually escalating. And of course, it involves the risk to spread out to the entire region. So it is really a very dangerous situation. And the most dangerous about it is possibly that we don't see where the conflict parties see their end game and how that would not only transform into a military solution, we might see military damage to the nuclear program of Iran, for example. I think there are lots of achievable goals. However, politically, I fail to see what should be the end game here of Israel.
Mm-hmm. You talk about how this could be a destabilizing factor for the region. How do you assess the neighboring countries' reactions up to this point?
I think for all the neighboring parties, it is clear that an escalation between Israel and Iran would also be negative for them. It would have a negative impact on their economy, and the instability has also the potential to really spiral out of control. So I think, well, there is no state in the region, particularly in favor of Iran. Everybody sees how this could be destabilizing to an extent that it is difficult also for the others to find a way out. And therefore, I think we should pay attention to a few moves. For example, last year, when Iran was already targeting Israel with drones and then with rockets, Jordan and the regional states played a role in intercepting these. And I think these are signs that not everybody wants to be drawn into it, and that there are enough forces to try and work against it, either silently or with actions.
So does that mean there's not much sympathy for Iran from the Arab countries?
Iran has always been pretty much isolated. Maybe in past years, we saw Iraq being more into Iran's field, and of course the Assad regime in Syria, but the Assad regime is gone. And also we should remember that in the entire crisis last year, when threats were already on the table from Israel towards Iran, Assad didn't lift a finger to even rhetorically defend Iran. So I think it has been quite lonely in the region, and therefore I think it cannot count on allies to come. Those it had, like the militias and proxies, Hezbollah most of all, they have been weakened to an extent that anyway they are not in the game any longer. And I think the only ones that we might need to pay attention to would be the Houthis in Yemen and then militias in Iraq. But apart from that, the Gulf states don't really have interests here. And the others are either too far from it or anyway would not side with Israel, but see to protect their own interests.
Are you surprised by the speed
would not
of
side with Iran, I said.
Yeah. Are you surprised about the speed of the escalation that we're seeing? You know, not militarily only, but also rhetorically, especially the messaging coming out of the White House? Or is this just something we need to be expecting this day and age?
Well, I think with US foreign policy, we have seen so many surprises. And I think if we look at all the things that President Trump has said about Iran and to Iran in the past months, many of them are mutually exclusive or contradictory. Like 2 days after the initial attack of Israel on Iran now happened, there were Trump and Iran had scheduled talks to find a political solution and accord about the nuclear program. The offensive by Israel interrupted this track, but I think originally Trump had signaled several times that this is what he prefers and that he's not a president for war, that he does not want to get US military directly involved in the region. So I think the strong statements he now does are a surprise, and also the apparent readiness to deploy troops and support Israel militarily in continuing the offensive.
That was Bente Scheller from the Heinrich Böll Foundation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.